This story has been recorded at an Addictive Eaters Anonymous meeting in New Zealand. You can email us at contact@aeanz.org.
So, yes, I haven't really thought a lot about what I would say tonight, which I think is a good thing. And but today, started having acupuncture, and I've only had it twice, and the second time was today. And it's a good opportunity to practice some of the things that you hear and learn here. So I had to try and stop thinking about what was hurting and what was happening, but think outside. So driving there, I thought of Tony because I was busy thinking about myself. It's like, and what Leonie said, look up. And I'm, yes, look up, Joanne, look up. So I'm looking up, and there's the Port Hills. And Tony shared about the hills, and I'm thinking, yes, there's the hills. I'm looking at the hills. And then when I got to acupuncture, it was everything about relaxing and my breathing and not thinking about what was going on in here. And I've been reading a little bit lately about, the thinking. And that thinking absolutely drove me mad. I didn't realise how warped my thinking was. I knew I was pretty bad before I came here, but I didn't really know how sick I was. My thinking had always been negative. That constant chatter that I've been reading in a book, that constant chatter has always been there, and it's always been negative, and it's really, I've been able to see good in people, but it's always turned around to more about gossip and putting people down, and a lot of negative chatter about myself. And I didn't realise that I was looking inward so much. And I didn't know any of this before I came here, and I didn't know how to look out of myself because I've got this disease of addiction, and I can't help but think about myself. I can remember always thinking that something was very, very odd about me. I grew up with my father was an alcoholic, my mum who struggled herself around eating and, other difficulties around, health, and three sisters. And I was the only one that, we all knew about Dad's drinking. We're all worried about it. We all wanted him to stop drinking. I thought that was my problem, that the way I felt about myself was all because of growing up in an alcoholic family. I was the one from a very early age, before high school, who was listening to the cans open, hunting out his alcohol, finding it in the fridge, out in the garage, hidden in all different places in the garage, tipping it out, thinking that he wouldn't get any more, asking him not to drink. All of this stuff, and I'm I'm not even a teenager, and I'm doing all of this stuff because I thought it would change everything. I didn't understand anything about addiction, anything about alcoholism, right through probably until I went into a treatment centre myself, which was, a lot later on. But I thought it was all about willpower. What I did identify with my father was the loneliness that he had inside himself. I didn't plan to talk about any of this, so whatever comes out just comes out, and I'm hoping that I'm able to help somebody that's new, because, everybody here has heard my story 100 times and it would be very boring. But I just want to aim to whatever comes out that might help somebody that's new. So my father, the loneliness that I seen in him, we lived in Kaiapoi, he worked in Kaiapoi, he worked in a pub, he'd worked there for years and years, and I used to see him, he'd walk down the street to work with his head down, and he was just a tiny little frail man, and God did he look sad. He always looked sad, and he had this loneliness that when I came to these meetings, and I think it was Leonie that said that this is a disease of loneliness, I thought, oh my God, you couldn't get further from the truth. This is a very, very lonely, isolating disease. And he was so lonely looking that I just wished him to die. I'm only young and I'm thinking, and I really wanted that to happen for him because he looked tortured by it, and it was just really sad to see him like that. And, nothing that anybody could do in our household could stop that drinking. And, I blamed a lot on him, and I took a lot of anger and stuff out on him, and I went to counselling for a long time to try and find out what is wrong with me. And this is not about the eating. That wasn't to try and find out anything about the eating. This was to try and find out why I was always so angry, why my moods fluctuated so much. 1 minute I was in a really, really low mood. The other, I wouldn't say in a really high mood, but, I probably felt, okay. But my moods were all over the place. I was always lonely, very low self-esteem, very paranoid, didn't like to walk down the road because I thought that people were looking at me all the time. Wanted to be like everybody else. Body image, I always felt really fat. Primary school, and this is even starting primary school, I can remember even thinking that I was very fat. And comments that were made that meant nothing. I was overly sensitive, and comments that were made that I remember that, God, nobody else would remember. Who remembers when they were about 5 sitting in a dental nurse's chair, the one that you used to pump up and it would rise up, and giving a bit of a creak, and the dental nurse says, oh, you're getting too big for this chair. Here I am thinking, oh my God, I am too fat for this chair. Trying to sit on my father's knee to give him a cuddle, and he made a similar comment about, oh, you're getting too big for a cuddle. You're getting older, But what he meant was, what I thought he meant was, you're too big. You're too fat, you're too big. Going for drives in the car, just dreading before we even left, going down the driveway thinking that bumper bar is going to hit on the road when we're backing out. And it does, because it's a low car, not because I'm sitting in the back, but because it's a low car. And all the way when we're out driving and everything, my dread is, how the heck are we going to get back up that driveway when we get home without that exhaust scraping on the bottom? I'd shuffle forward in the seat. There's just all this sort of thinking that, I'm just a little wee girl, and going to bed at night and crying because I felt so different to everybody else. This is before I even got to high school. It's just, if I knew my children felt like that, and they may have and might not be able to articulate it till now, I do have children that have addiction, they probably did have some of those similar feelings, but they haven't talked about those feelings. But it's hard work. And around that body image, I also, started to have, thoughts around food and trying not to eat. My goal was I always wanted to be skinny. I thought that if I was skinny, it would be okay. And there were times when I was really overweight, and there were times when I weren't. It didn't matter whether I was or whether I wasn't. In my mind, I was overweight. It didn't matter what I ate, whether it was a piece of fruit or it was a piece of cake. In my mind, anything that I ate above that diet, I'd put on weight. And it set the scene for the mood that I would be in, during the day. And how I would put things out to other people, my family, my ex-husband, my kids, my parents, how I would treat them because I was angry. If I had it's either fat days or thin days, really. Fat days, I was always angry and I took it out on everybody. So that was kind of a life, and then you throw into the mix, that you start having children. You're not even coping with life, and all of a sudden you're having children. I was 20 when I had my first son, and God, my aim was not to put on weight, not to get weighed when I went to the hospital, but of course I couldn't stop eating, and I ate such rubbish food that I started to, I was getting swollen and had lots of fluid, and when I would go to the hospital they'd say you need to watch what you eat. Talked about a diet and what I should be eating, and I left that hospital and I could not eat what they had said to eat. And it is diet related, preeclampsia, and that's what I had, and had him at 10 weeks early. And that's just I had a lot of fear around a lot of stuff, and just throwing children into the mix and trying to parent is actually not a good mix. I came to this program when I was when I had 3 children, and my son that's 25, he was, God, I think he was about 1 or 2, something around there. And when I came to the fellowship here, I loved what I heard from the minute that I walked in the doors. I heard people with, who shared their experience and shared a solution as to how they were not eating the way that I was. I tried to find a solution in counselling and hypnotists and psychodrama, and Janelle talks about psychodrama, and I recall my experience of that, which wasn't good. And I tried a lot of different things, but I never, and church, and I couldn't find a solution to find out what was wrong with me. I guess that I wanted an inner peace. I wanted a peace. I wanted to like myself. I wanted to feel comfortable with who I was, and I couldn't get there, and I didn't know how to get there. And I didn't want to be an angry mother that was yelling at her children and sending them off to school crying and, calling them names and, lashing out at them because I was in a bad mood. And I didn't want to be like that, and I would go to bed at night and think about all the ways that I wasn't going to be like that, and how I was going to wake up and, be a really pleasant mother and feel good about myself. And every morning I woke up, I felt exactly the same. And, when I came to these rooms, there was a lot of people that were talking about those things that they had done, and they weren't doing them anymore. A higher power had helped them to stop eating and to start living a normal life and be good people, in society, and be doing the right thing and be thoughtful and tolerant to others. I was the opposite of all those things. And I wanted what people had so much, like I just knew that the answer was here. I went home after my first meeting and I cried because I was so excited. Like I knew it was here. It was the most exciting thing and the only place that had given me so much hope. Like I was so hopeful. And I I can't remember when I got a sponsor. I started off coming to one meeting a week. I quickly learned that that actually wasn't enough for me, and I went to another meeting, and I kind of like knew in myself that that wasn't enough. And I can't remember getting a sponsor and being told that I needed to go to more meetings, but I just knew within myself that that's what I needed for myself and for my recovery. And I heard very quickly that actually you can't, if you want to put your family first and this program last, they're not going to reap the benefits. You know, there's not going to be a lot of changes. You know, it says half measures avail us nothing, and that's exactly right. Half measures avail us completely nothing. You know, it's and also I know that I was thinking that unless I give this 110%, I'm not going to get any results. I had 4 children, you know, and I lived out in North Canterbury, and my ex-husband worked really hard. He worked long hours. He would come home just as I needed to walk out the door, and I made sure that I had 4 children bathed, you know, in bed, for when he came home to try and make it, you know, easier. If he walked in and he was a little bit late, that was not a good outcome. You know, I was so angry. I wouldn't even talk to him. I'd be gone. And I was just so angry that he didn't get home in time for me to go to my meetings. And sometimes he was so late that I couldn't go to my meetings, and that was, you know, like not talking for a few days. So it took a long time for things to change, but I just knew that I needed to, you know, go to the meetings, and, you know, at that stage I was going to 4 meetings with, you know, 4 small children. And I knew when I came here that I could not stop eating. I tried and tried, and I could not stop eating. You know, I could not have one of something. And I tried to hold it off for as long as I could during the day, and I could not get through the day without eating. And, you know, there were periods of time where I could have a diet, but I could never stay on it very long. And I came here and I knew what I needed to do, and I had a food plan, and I had a sponsor, and I was coming to meetings, and I was down on my knees every morning praying, and I was ringing people, and I was doing everything that I could, and I couldn't stop eating. I'd come to meetings, and I'd have to say in those meetings that I'd been eating, and I wanted to hide under the seat because it was so humiliating. People were coming in after me, and they were getting this program, and I wasn't. And I thought, I'm doing something wrong, you know. I just didn't know what. And I was ringing my sponsor, and she kept on saying to me, keep doing what you're doing, it's a gift. And I didn't know what that meant, and it's a similar story as to what my sponsor, you know, would share in meetings, and she didn't know what her sponsor meant either. And I had no idea, because I didn't know what that gift was, and I didn't know what it was like to stop eating, and I couldn't imagine life without having that obsession to eat each day. You know, like I could not imagine fighting that. And I'd be down on my knees, and I'd be praying just to get through that day without eating. And of course, I didn't. So I'd end up eating everything, and then have that remorse and guilt again, and think tomorrow I'll start again. And I'd do that every day, and oh my gosh, it was, you know, I think I did that for a good couple of years, coming to this program and thinking I am never going to get this program. And I was actually scared. I was really scared that I was not going to get this program. And I didn't stop coming because I knew this was where it was. Like, it wasn't anywhere else. Like, I've never felt what I felt in these rooms. So I knew it was here, and it was working for others. And so I kept on coming. I'd leave meetings, and somebody would have mentioned about something that they used to eat, and that switch would go down and I'd be thinking about that, so I'd leave meetings and I'd have to get it on the way home, or I'd have to find it, I started eating even more than what I used to eat. I'd go home on my way home and I'd stop at McDonald's and I couldn't decide what sort of ice cream sundae I got, so I got all flavours. And I used to sit down the road where I lived, and I'd sit down the road there and I'd eat them all in the car before I even got home. Feel like it was all smeared around my face, and that, Wayne would know when I got home. And then I'd walk in the door, and Robin always mentioned about the baking and cutting the side of the slice, and I'd do that. I'd walk in and I'd cut a little bit of the side off a bit of cake, the baking that I'd done, and I'd be gone and eating that. I would have felt so sick with the ice cream sundaes that I had eaten, and then I'm eating this cake, and it was just a cycle where I just thought I'm never going to get out of it. And then one day, after a good couple of years, I remember having the craving to eat, and it was really intense, and there was food all on the bench. I can just see it as plain as day. There was food all on the bench, and I'd started the day off okay, and I'd had my breakfast, and it was mid-afternoon. The kids were there, they were playing in the background. It was as if it was like a tunnel, and I could hear their voices, and it was just like wah, wah, wah in the background, because I was just so focused on wanting this food that was on the bench. And for the first time, I had this feeling that I didn't want that food more than what I wanted it. And tears rolling down my eyes, that's how much I wanted it. And for the first time, I never ate it. And I rang my sponsor, and I haven't had the craving since that day. Like it was there 1 minute and completely removed the next. Like, that is such a miracle. That is honestly such a miracle. I know I haven't done that, and I know that without a doubt that my higher power removed that craving right there on that spot. And I don't know why it was that day and not any other day, but it was that day and that time, and that's when it happened. And I couldn't will myself for that to happen, because I had tried and tried and tried for years. And every single day is no longer a fight with the food. I just don't have that fight. My higher power, I struggled. I thought that was another reason why I couldn't stop eating, was because of trying to feel that spiritual feeling, or I always wanted something about my higher power so that I knew that I had one. It was usually always centered around, I had a baby that died at 3.5 months old, and it was always, give me a sign and I'll believe, or I don't believe in a higher power because didn't really actually do anything then. He was christened 2 weeks before that, didn't really do it, and I put so much on that, on the problem or why not to. I don't believe that at all, that's just absolutely hogwash, that's not why I didn't have that connection with a higher power. I didn't have a connection with a higher power just because I actually didn't feel it. It's not that I didn't have a connection or a higher power was, that I couldn't stop eating because of all these things that happen. I couldn't stop eating because I've got this disease of addiction, and I actually don't choose when it's time, when that craving is going to be removed. It just actually happens beyond my control, I don't think there's anything that I can do except for doing what I did. And then something just happens in God's time. It's not in my time. It's in God's time. I guess that maybe I stepped out of the way a little bit, and it got worse. And I think that's probably what had to happen, is that it actually got worse. So since that time, coming to meetings, I still, after, all this time, over 20 years, have not thought when I've sat in a meeting, oh my gosh, I don't really want to come to meetings anymore. Oh God, I'd really rather stay home and watch a program on TV. Other messages that I heard was, don't listen to your head, get your backside in a chair. When you're new, you actually don't need to know anything about these steps and traditions. You don't even need to be trying to work out what higher power, whether or not you believe in God, whether you don't, what sort of higher power you have. You actually just need to come and sit in meetings and just listen. You don't have to get up and share and talk about, all your problems and everything that's happening. Or you actually can just come into these rooms and listen, because despite ourselves, something rubs off on us, and we start learning about this program. We start learning about how to, and none of us are perfect, but we start learning how to, be a better person in society, be a better friend, be a better wife, a better mother, a better sister, that to be friendly to somebody and think of others. And, there's so many people around that just need somebody, just need a smile, just need a, hi, how you doing, And those things are not hard, except for in this disease, they're really, really hard. It's so hard sometimes in this disease, and gosh, even in this program, sometimes it's just so hard to stop thinking about myself and walk out and see somebody and smile at them. But actually, I know that it's getting better. I know that my whole life is getting better. Yesterday I was watching my youngest son, who's actually 22 now, and I take my recovery from when he was 6 weeks old. He came around yesterday with his girlfriend. She's such a nice girl. And all the girlfriends like me, that's another thing. I mean, they all like me. I thought I don't have all daughters, but actually I have all these boys and I get the girls. So and they're all nice. And he came around and he was talking about, I can't remember what he said, but he says, I had the best birthday when I was 5. I was thinking, what did he do? and he said, remember you've got those that tape of when I had the clown's birthday. And so we put them on, and honestly, she said, oh, you're so patient with your boys. And the kids were laughing, and Caleb was only 2, and Isaac was a baby, and, and there was all different ones. And there's a lot of laughter. Here I am thinking that I was just such this dreadful mother all the time. And I know we're really hard on ourselves. And actually, there was a lot of times when there was a lot of laughter, there was a lot of, always reading books and playing and parks, and, there was in the snow. And there was just so much good stuff. And his 5th birthday, he remembered the cake that I made him, a train track or something. It was this big cake. And he had a really nice birthday, and there was lots of family and lots of kids there. But we hired this clown. And of course it had the clown with a pretend chopping block thing. And of course they picked Caleb, who was 8. And he had to put his head in this hole. Well, Eli could not bear it. Every time the clown started talking, he'd over and he'd flick the latch. Because the clown's talking about, I hope all this blood doesn't come out of his head. Eli's face, his lips dropped, he's quivering, the poor wee boy. And then the clown would start talking and flick the latch, and next minute Eli'd flick it again. And this happened like about 3 or 4 times. He came over, and you can see he's sitting on my knee, and he's trying not to cry. And then he could not look, and he's wiping his eyes like this. And then, of course, it didn't go down, and then he's like this, and then he's laughing and he's cheeky as anything, but it was so funny. And, you know, it just showed that there was good times, you know, there's good times in amongst the bad times, and, you know, there's good in everything that happens through life, but I'm lucky I've got a second shot with my grandchildren to make it happy, you know, and not for them to experience a lot of, you know, fighting and arguing and the erratic and chaotic up and down life of an addict, pretty much. So it's good to be here. Thank you.